All right, so for this game, it looks like we've got 6 co-workers and they're going to be playing these table tennis matches against each other. And what we are going to have to figure out is basically who plays against who in what game. Now, there are 3 games. So what we can do is we can set it up based on the games themselves. It's somewhat sequential, so that's probably a pretty good giveaway for how this is going to go. And then in each game, what's going to happen is we're going to have 2 people playing against each other, which makes sense considering it's table tennis. Now, what we could do for this game is we can set this up as a 2-tiered setup. But in this case, the tiers are not going to be unique kind of spaces. Rather, they're just 2 spaces for 2 different people, since every single game is going to have 2 people playing. Now, from there, I guess let's go. So the elements themselves, we have FGH, JLM. So we got our 6. And the rule. So the first rule tells us that neither F nor G can play in game 1. So F, G cannot go into the first game. Next, we are told that J and L cannot play in the third game. So J, L cannot play in game 3. Now, I mean, both of these rules are kind of restrictive, but I guess they don't really interrelate with each other, do they? Because F and G can still go into 2 or 3 potentially. J and L can still go into 1 or 2. So yeah, let's keep going. F must play against either G or H. So I guess we can say that F is going to have to be with either G or H. Now that's kind of a big deal, isn't it? Because first of all, I mean, we definitely know that this block is definitely not going to go into game 1 because F can never be in game 1. So this block is either going to go into game 2 or game 3. And wherever you put it, it's going to lock out that entire game. So that's kind of significant. In fact, so for example, if we put it into game number 2, that would then force J and L. They can't go into game 3 and 2 is locked out. So they would get forced into game 1. And if we put the FGH kind of into game 3, I guess it's a bit more flexible. But still, this is probably going to be a pretty good candidate for exhaustion. There's only 2 major plays. And no matter what you do, you're taking up a good chunk of the board. So that's pretty good. But before we keep going, let's finish off the rule. So the last rule tells us that G cannot play against J. So G and J cannot be together. And I guess, yeah, we can't do much more with that. So yeah, let's exhaust the game as we said. So essentially the FGH setup, either it's going to be in game 2 or it's going to be in game 3. And in game 2, as we said, the J and the L now get forced into the first game. So that's pretty nice. We can say that they'll have to be here. And that leaves us with M. So M's going to have to go into game 3 now, along with the other of G or H. And there's no real restrictions on G or H there, so that can go either way. Now, in the second set, we don't know much more, do we? Because, I mean, J and L can still bounce between 1 or 2, but that's completely flexible. G can't go into 1, but G could go into game 2 or into game 3 over here. I mean, I guess G and J can't be together, which is kind of, if G is in game 2, that's significant. But I suppose what you could do, and this is a bit of a personal choice, you could arguably sub-exhaust this at this point. You could say that, you know what, the G only has 2 plays. Either it's going to go here, and that would lock out game 3, which is kind of nice, but that's as far as it would go. Or G would go over here. But if G goes here, then J can't go with it, so J would get forced into 1, which is a nice further deduction. Whether you want to take those, extra steps, or if you want to go straight to the questions, I mean, again, there's going to be a certain level of personal judgment calls, and both are reasonable decisions to go with. For the sake of this game, let's just go with what we have as is. Now, to the question. So the first question is our standard exclusion question, which as usual asks us for just what could be a complete setup. And the way that we approach these as usual is just based on the original rules. So the first rule was that F and G cannot go into game 1. So answer choice A easily gets disqualified. B, C, D, and E all look okay. Next, J and L cannot go in game 3. That would get rid of answer choice B, which has L there. And the rest are okay. Next, F has to go with either G or H, so we're just down to C, D, E. So answer choice C conveniently gets disqualified there. F can't be with J. The other two, F, G, F, H, are good. And lastly, G and J don't play nice, and that gets rid of answer choice E. So that leaves us with answer choice D as the best answer to question number 6. And as usual, I guess let's plug that into the board. Answer choice D says J and M. Then we've got H and L, and then F and G. And for the record, you'll notice that that pretty much fits into the second template where we have F here with G. Let's keep going. Question number 7 is our first local. Let's take a look. If M is in the third game, well, if we've got M in the third game, actually we don't need to set up a scenario, because if M is in the third game, that pretty much forces us into the first template. In fact, let me just label these. That would force us into template A over here, wouldn't it? Because in the second template, obviously M is not in the third game. And in the first template, that gives us everything that we need to know. If M is in the third game, all of this will happen, and we don't know anything else. So let's see what we can do. The question itself asks, L has to play against who? And we have the answer. L has to play against J. The best answer here is answer choice D to question 7. Next, number 8. If J plays in the second game, well, if J plays in the second game, I suppose that would force you into the second template here. Now, you might be able to swing this and do this mentally, because if J plays in the second game, you might be able to recognize that. Then that means that G cannot be here, so G would get forced over into here, and I guess that would mean that H would then go over here with, actually I guess not necessarily anyone, but H would be forced into, actually not even necessarily 1, because H could go into 2. So if you find that a bit overwhelming, it's not unreasonable to just lay out a setup. And that's the thing, if there's any doubt, if there's any question about can you handle everything in your head, just quickly run a setup and see what happens. So if we put J into game 2, then we know that we're in the second template, right? So F is going to go into game 3, except G can't be with J over here, and we know G can't be in 1, so G is going to be forced in here with F. And from there, it seems like we're a little flexible, aren't we? Because L can still go wherever, H can still go wherever, M can go wherever, so really anything goes. The question asks, which of the following could be one of the games? Answer choice A, F goes against H, and well, no, F is with G, so that's not going to happen. Answer choice B, F is against M. No, F is already with G. Can we have G with L? And no, G is already with F. Can we have G with M? No, same problem. Answer choice E, can we have H and L? And maybe, H and L potentially could go into game 1 here, and then J would be with M, the only other person. So the best answer to question number 8 is E. Next, question number 9. If F plays against H in one of the games, so I guess let's take a look at our templates. If F is with H, now to be fair, that would be consistent with both of these possibilities, right? So in the top template, H would go here and then G would go there. And in the bottom template, if F is with H, then I suppose that would force the G to go into here. And then J can't be with G, so J would get forced into number 1. Now, that one's a little bit tougher to run mentally, so it might not be a bad idea to quickly just put that on the board. Again, if you can handle it in your head, then you might want to just take a quick look and see what you can do with it. But again, if it feels overwhelming, then it's not a bad idea to put it down on paper. So in this scenario, we said F is with H, and this is just template B. So if F is with H and template B, then as we said, G can't go into 1, so G gets forced into 2. But then since G and J don't play nice, that forces the J to go into 1. And then L and M, they're a little bit flexible, right? So they can go either way. So if F is with H, now to be clear, we have 2 possibilities. Either we're in template A, in which case this is H and this is G, and that's easy enough, or we're in template B, which resolves to basically this. The question now asks, what now must be true? A, F plays in the second game, Well, we don't know that because we could have the FH block in either game 2 or 3. Answer choice B, H plays in the third game, and no, we said the FH block could have gone over here, so that doesn't have to be true. Answer choice C, J plays in the first game. Oh, hey, there it is. Yeah, you'll notice that no matter what, whether we're in template A or template B, J is in game number 1. So the best answer to question number 9 is C. For the record, as far as the others are concerned, L is in the first game, and no, here L is in the first game, but L could also flip to game 2, so that doesn't have to be true. And E, M plays in the third game, and no, it could be over here, but it could also be in the second template, in which case M is not in the third game. So once again, the best answer here was C to number 9. Next, number 10 is global. We'll come back to this one in a moment. Number 11 is a modifier, so I guess let's go back to number 10. Exactly how many of the coworkers are there, any one of whom can play in the second game? So I guess let's see what we can do. I mean, we definitely know that in the first template, F, G, or H could have played in the second game. So that's 1, 2, and 3 confirmed. Actually, in this scenario that we just ran, and for the record, this is one of the benefits of just trying out a scenario. If you get overwhelmed, it still gives you a bit of history that you might be able to use elsewhere. We know L and M could definitely go into game 2 as well. And in this scenario, the only other person, we have J, and J could go into game 2 as well. So it seems like 6. Everybody could go into game 2. The best answer to question number 10 is E. Lastly, number 11. Which of the following, if we subbed it in for the rule that J and G cannot be together, would have the same effect? So we're trying to replace effectively this rule over here. Now, just as a reminder, if you're looking for a rule that will perfectly replace that other rule, you're essentially looking for an answer choice that first of all, it's going to have to be something that was always true per the original rules of the game, and it's going to be something that if you implemented it, it would also guarantee this further implication that G and J are not going to be together. So there's essentially 2 parameters, and a good answer choice has to meet both. Let's see what we can do. Answer choice A. If H is in game 1, then G would have to play in the third game. So I suppose, first of all, does that really have to be true that if H is in 1, then G would go? Actually, I suppose it does, doesn't it? Because if H is in 1, then we're not in this template, so we would be here. But if H is in 1, then the only person who can go here is, in fact, G. So incidentally, answer choice A did have to be true. But then the second question here is, does that really ensure that G and J can't be together? And one thing that should stick out is the fact that this rule only really tells us what happens if H is in 1. But with these kinds of answer choices, when you have a conditional statement, you always want to worry about what happens if you don't trigger the condition. And if we didn't trigger the condition, if H wasn't in game 1, so for example, maybe H decides to go into game 3, then would that really stop G and J from going together? And no, couldn't G and J then go together, for example, in position number 2, right? If we run a blank scenario, because I mean these are based on the original set of rules, but if you run a blank scenario, if we have H in game 3 with F, so you have an FH block here, and we didn't have the GJ restriction, then wouldn't that allow G and J to go pretty easily into 2? And yeah, it seems like it would. So even though answer choice A originally had to be true, this doesn't seem like it would have the impact that we would need it to. So answer choice A is out. Answer choice B. If J is in the second game, then G would have to go in game 3. Well, if G is in game 2, if J is in game 2 rather, would G have had to go into game 3? And again, to be fair, that's true, because if J was in game 2, then we know that G wouldn't be able to go with it, and so G would have been forced into game 3 since G cannot go in game number 1. But then there's the other question. Does this actually ensure that G and J will never be together? And the thing is, again, we have to worry about, I mean, if J is in game 2 according to this, then G would get pushed into 3, and then G and J would be separated. But what if J wasn't in game 2? Then wouldn't that still allow them to go together? So for example, if J was in game 1, perhaps, Although, actually, wait a minute. If J's in game 1, then G's not going to be in game 1 with it because G can never be in game 1. So actually this would work, wouldn't it? Because according to this rule, if J is in game 2, then it would push G into game 3, in which case they would be separated. But if J wasn't in game 2, I mean, J could never go into game 3. And so the only other place she can go is game 1. But in game 1, she would never be with G regardless, which means answer choice B, if we implemented this as a rule, it actually would ensure that G and J will never be together. Answer choice B is viable. I suppose another way of looking at this answer choice is that G and J, the only place that they ever could have gone together is in game 2, right? Because J is never going to go in 3, so they would never be together in 3. And G is not in 1, so they would never be in 1. So if they were ever to go together, they could have only gone together in game number 2. But according to answer choice B, that would eliminate that possibility because it tells us that if J is in game 2, then it pushes G away. So either way, answer choice B is viable. Answer choice C, let's just take a look at the rest. J must play in the game immediately before F. Now this, you'll notice that this doesn't have to be true because we've had scenarios where J was not in the game immediately before F. So since this never had to be true in the first place, we can get rid of it. Answer choice D, J must play in the game immediately before G. And same deal, J didn't have to go in the game right before G. We've seen scenarios where that didn't happen, so this doesn't get the job. This never had to be true. We can get rid of D. Answer choice E, G cannot play against L. Now, wait, that's not true either. G could have played against L. We've seen a scenario right there. There was nothing that would have stopped that. So E never had to be true in the first place. So the only viable answer choice to question number 11 is B. For the record, if the approach that we took here doesn't have to be true and doesn't get the job done, if that's at all uneasy, make sure you go to the lesson specifically for these questions. There is a rule replacement lesson that you should probably go through just to kind of hammer away at this.